The reload kit comes in a tin like this, and inside the tin is a collection of parts to make your existing locks more of a challenge to open up. So maybe you have our progressive locks, or you have one of our cutaways, and you've been picking at that thing for about 2 months now, and it's become easy, mainly because you've picked it over and over and over again. So what do we want to do? We want to make it more challenging, and that is what the reload kit is. It's a challenge kit. It will let you take your existing lock and reconfigure it in a way to make it harder to open, which will take more skill to open, which will improve your lock picking skills in the end. So let's deep dive into what is inside. So you get 2 pinning mats that let you nicely line up your pins. It comes with a resin plug follower so you can take the lock apart. If you chose the option for tweezers, they come like this, and they have nicely formed tips that make it easy to pick up pins and springs and place them in the lock or move them around. It comes with extra springs. It comes with extra pins for the retaining cap on the back of our locks. And it comes with these keys that come with pins as well. Now, it all comes in little bags. You're going to get a whole bunch of little bags like this. And inside a bag will be a key and a series of pins. And those pins will match up with the cuts inside the key so that when you repin it, you still have a working key. It also comes with a ton of security pins, and I've got them all kind of piled out here. It comes with serrated pins, and you can see a serrated pin here. Has the cuts in the bottom of the pin just to make it catch on the shear line. It comes with spool pins. They're skinnier in the middle, and they kind of twist in funny ways inside the lock. It also comes with mushroom pins. They also twist in an odd way inside the lock. And then finally, it comes with a whole bunch of different check pins, which will also make things challenging. You also get 2 different types of springs. Different springs give different resistance. That different resistance will make it easier to lift or lower the pin. And as you vary it, that means it will feel different as you're setting those pins throughout the lock. So all of those things will make it more difficult to open a lock. So how do we end up replacing it? Let's go through that now. So let's take our 5-pin here, and we are going to replace it with this green key here. And you can see the green key is cut in a way where it is low in the middle. So if you're having to set those middle pins first, that is going to make it very hard to set the front and the back after that, particularly the back, because you might overset these pins with your pick as you're working at it, and it's going to make it a challenge. So let's set that challenge up in the lock. First thing we got to do is we got to take this one apart, and I'm going to take this back, and I'm going to get this lid off of here so that I can kind of collect some of the parts that I'm dealing with. So resin plug follower. On the back is a handy little tool that helps you remove this cap. If you're just watching this video for the fun of it and you don't have one of these and you do want to take your lock apart, you can do so. You don't need a tool like this. You can just use a short hook to push things down, and that will let you take it apart. You'll pull out this pin. That's the one that I'm referring to, pushing down with your short hook, and then you can spin that off with your fingers. And there is a small spring that is in there as well. Make sure you get that small spring out. If you lose any of these, don't sweat it. There are extras inside the kit. Now, we've got to push out the core. Watch this part twice, because this is where, if you make a mistake, pins and springs be flying. So on the head of the key, you will see there is our logo. Turn that away from the top of the lock. Imagine in the top of the lock here, we've got pins and springs as well. Those are the top pins there, and we don't want those interfering as we're pushing out the core. I now know that with the key head facing in this direction, the bottom pins are also facing up as I push it out. I take the resin plug follower. I have the wider end facing the top, and watch as I push things out. We are going to just make sure that everything is always in contact. And by contact, I mean that we want the resin plug follower pushing against that core to push it out of the lock. If you get a gap in between the two, that leaves a potential for one of those spare pins to push down in there. Now, one fun thing to take a look at. This is that 5-pin lock, but notice there is an empty slot at the end, and that is because all the Sparrow's progressive locks and cutaways are actually drilled to be 6-pin locks. So if you want that large challenge, you can repin this to be a 6-pin lock, and that option does come in the set, and you can see that is this larger key here, and you can see I've got the 6 pins set out for that. But at this time, what we want to do is we are going to repin it for 5 and this green key. So I'm just going to carefully take these, and I'm going to dump them into this tray there. Don't need that key anymore because it goes with those. And I am going to start loading these pins up. Now, one thing to look for is when you want to find out what is the order that these pins go into, you can line them up on the key first. And you can see here for the blue key, I've done it where each pin is in the right spot. And when it's in the right spot, you can see how it forms a straight line along the top there. So the deeper the cut, the longer the pin needs to be for that section. And that is all lined up there. I've already done it for the green key, and we are going to start loading it up. And the direction is going to be from the keyway side. This is where these tweezers come in handy to just nicely grab onto those pins. I'll load everything up. 4. 1 to go. Now without the key in, you can see that there are little gaps that go along the top. That's because it would be below the shear line, and you're having the top pins push in there when you pick it, and you get everything to the shear line. That's what lets the lock turn open. So if we've done this well, when we put this key in, everything should sit nice and flush, and it does. So actually I'm seeing 2 that are just slightly off. So I think I've got my order a little bit wrong here. And you can kind of see it. There's 2 that were quite close, but this one is sticking up high, and that one is just slightly low. So, teachable moment here. I am just going to cover that one up and dump this one out. I'm going to do it on the table to keep it separate. And then the one that is high, I'm also going to dump out. And now that high pin, let's just swap the locations. There we go. Everything nice and flush. Now we've got to get this back into the lock. So what we did before, we're going to do in reverse. We've got our plug follower there. We're going to keep pressure against it, and we are going to push the core in. Make sure you have the core facing up. And by up, I'm talking to the pins. And there we go. Core is properly in. We're not done yet. We want to secure everything into place. So we go back and find that tiny spring. Tiny spring goes into that little hole that is in the back of the tail cap. Then we get our retaining pin. Then we get our tail cap. Plug follower tool just to tighten it up. When you tighten this thing up, don't over tighten it. If you crank it all the way down, it'll make it hard to turn the core of the lock. So back it off just a little bit. And if we've done this right, everything seems to be working. It is locked up, and now it spins. And that is how we just quickly use the reload kit to make this a harder lock to open up. Because look at the difference between these keyways. That is a difference. And you will notice that when you're trying to pick this open. Now, something we could have done, we could have also changed the top pins. And the top pins, you could have added some of these security pins into it. So here we've done a swap out where we knew the top pins was a 5, and we knew the core was a 5 as well. So we only really had to swap out that core. Let's say that we needed to redo a 4 or perhaps a 3, and we want to make that into a 5. We've got to add top pins as well. So let's go through this again, but now we're also going to replace the top pins inside the lock. Okay, so let's put this one out of the way for now. We've nicely repinned this to a 5. And again, that was with one of the progressives. It would have been the same process for one of our cutaways. That doesn't change anything. This will keep over here. So let's take a 3-pin and we're going to make it into a 4-pin lock. So we're going to replace one of the top pins. A lot of the process is going to be the same. I am going to use that resin plug follower to take it apart. And again, we're going to look and make sure we maintain this cap, pin, and the small spring. I'm doing it in here because I've kind of filled this up, but clearly you can see why you want to have these mats, because that is what this is for. We are going to turn the key so that it's slightly away again. Resin plug follower, wider section pushing towards the top pins. Get everything nicely lined up here. Through it goes, 3-pin lock, 3 pins in the bottom. We now want to make this into a challenging 4-pin. So we got 2 options here. We can rekey it, use one of these, or we can just grab a security pin and drop it in. Now, one thing is, we've taken a random pin and dropped it in the bottom. That key won't work anymore because it's not cut for that pin that we've put in there. So you have a choice. Do you want the key to work? Do you want to put a security pin in the bottom? Do you want to put it in the top? World is yours. You make the challenge that you want. So we have that in the bottom. We're now going to take the key out. And now we have to reload the top of this lock so that it has 4 pins all along the top. So very carefully we are going to pull out the resin plug follower and start collecting what is in here, because we've got to add one more pin. If we do it slowly enough and carefully enough, the springs should stay in place, and they'll all be towards the front of this lock, and we'll get a couple pins that are going to fall out. Let's see what happens here. That sounded like 3 pins jumping out, and there's the pins jumping out. And if I take a look inside the core, I don't see the springs, so they're all sitting nicely in their little housing already. So I've got this cutaway here, where I've really cut it away. I've cut it in half. This is the top of the lock, so I'm holding it upside down in a way. This is where those pins sit. We have to make sure that if we want to pin this up to be 4 pins right now, we're going to make sure that we get springs in all of those. We're going to make sure we get pins in those 4 spots. And while we do that, we also need to cover it in a way. And by cover, I mean that, imagine we are going to take a spring, you're going to drop it into position, and then once it's in position, you're going to take a pin, put it into that same hole, but with your tweezers now push down on its little head and slide that plug follower forward to hold it into place. Hopefully I didn't cover too much of that with my hands. So now we are going to do that live. So let's get that extra spring out, and let me just take account of what we've got in here. And I've got extra springs there, and I will need another top pin. So top pins do come in one of the bags, and you can see them that a top pin does not have as pointy of an end as the regular pins. I'll kind of show that to you here. So, reloading the top. We are going to get the plug follower into the back of the lock. Light is your friend here. And we are going to make sure that we've got springs in every slot. Now, I don't think I lost any. So I am dropping one just into that 4th position. I am now taking the pin back to the 4th position. I put it part way down, and I slide that resin plug follower forward, tap it on its head, and cover it up. Now we do the 3rd position. And this is the part that just takes a little bit more patience and time, but with it, this is how you can make that lock that you have into any animal that you want it to be. You want mushroom pins up here, go for it. You want spools, go for it. This is how you make your Franken lock and your challenging lock. And it would also apply that if you wanted to work with what is the sidewinder, you could do that too. And I tell you, this is where these tweezers really come in handy. Okay, we've done it. We've now taken the 3, loaded it for 4. We have our core. We're just going to make sure the pins are up and away, and we just slowly push that into place. We now have 4 bottom pins, 4 top pins. What do we do now? We get our tiny spring in the back and our retaining clip. Retaining pin in place. Cap goes on it. Now, remember that we changed one of those bottom pins to a security pin. So when I lock this thing up, I have made a commitment, because I don't have a key right now that will open this thing up. I would have to pick it open because I put one of those special security pins in the bottom. But that's what we're here to do, learn picking. So, quick review on what we've gone over. We have learned how to take a 5-pin lock and switch out all the bottoms to make it a nasty lock. We've learned how to add different security pins, and we've even gone over how to change out the top pins to make those into different configurations and make the lock any challenge you want to help you increase your lock picking skills. And that's what we want to do at Sparrows. We want to make you a better lock picker, and the reload kit is going to help get you there.